My name is Robyn Papworth and I'm from Play, Move, Improve. I'm a developmental educator, exercise physiologist, and I train early childhood teachers, education assistants, primary school teachers, and parents. So I also had a really great question about how to progress from a toddler palmer grip to a more advanced preschool pincer grip. So what we want to do when we're working from a palmer grip into more of we call this a modified pincer grip, and then this is your proper pincer grip, is we want to develop the fine motor development of the child. Children need sensory experiences in their hands to be able to go from mud, sand, slime play to using a pencil. The challenge for you all is we have this rush at the moment in our community to get children academically ready for school. We want them writing their name, drawing numbers, perfect letter formation by the time they start school, rather than get the hands involved in sensory play, get the hands understanding the world before putting a pencil inside the hand. So what I encourage all children to do is to go back to the basics as much as we can when it comes to fine motor. So for example, it might be if you're at home and you're a parent, it might be getting them involved in the really basic baking. So whether it's rolling dough, whether it's tearing lettuce for the salad, it might be peeling peas, so peeling open the snap peas, whatever you can do to get that sensory experience in the kitchen. There's lots of beautiful ideas in the kitchen for children's fine motor development. The other thing we want to try and do is get them outdoors, whether that be in the garden, whether peeling off the leaves, cutting leaves with scissors. It could also be with the rosemary. They can take the sprigs of rosemary apart, but trying to get as many different textures and smells and sensations in the hands. So then when it goes to pick up a pencil, it's got more idea of what this pencil even is. Another great thing we want to encourage before we give a pencil into a child's hand is, do they have bilateral coordination? Are they able to use two hands at the same time? Things that we do for that is we'll scrunch up a paper ball. Being able to scrunch paper is great for their hands. It builds up strength. It makes both hands have to work together. It's also fantastic because you can feel all the different textures in the scrunched up paper. Another great thing to do is we open up our scrunched up paper ball and we tear it. What you'll see, excuse me while I make a noise, what you'll see is children who have difficulty with bilateral coordination will try and tear the paper with their shoulders. You'll see lots of elbow movement when our fine motor development isn't quite established. So lots of elbow movement to try and tear that paper rather than pincer grip movement where just the fingers are moving. So we want to, before even putting a pencil in a child's hand, do they have that bilateral coordination to be able to use two hands at the same time? The smaller we go with our tearing, the more dexterity, the more coordination we need with our fingers. So sometimes we feel like we need to rush children to get to hold a pencil. Pencil would be the last thing that we do in regards to fine motor in those preschool and early primary years. We need more manipulatives and more objects in their hands. Play-Doh, as you probably already know, is fantastic. With Play-Doh, we can roll balls, we can roll out sausages, we can create snails, we can squash things, because when we get that pressure to squash Play-Doh, it develops all those sensations that our hand needs before we progress into a pencil or a texter. The next thing, I had a great question of how we get children involved if they don't like to write their name. Another great question. So we had a parent who was having a child who was reluctant to write their name. So what we do is we go back to the basics. Again, they may have been rushed to write their name because of starting school before they were ready to write their name. They may be like my daughter, where she's too busy climbing out on the A-frame. She's too busy outside climbing. She doesn't want to sit down and write her name. So what I always encourage is we start with mark making. So what mark making basically meant in my family was we are a big footy family. So we love the AFL. So every AFL season, and luckily for me, that was perfect for Phoebe, was we have our sports stats. So we, in the paper, we do our footy tips of who's going to win the game. And all we might do is we have the Tigers versus the Eagles. And all I did was I would write the teams down. Sorry, I'm just admitting people. When I randomly touch my screen, it's just letting people in. Welcome. When I write the teams down, and then I start to show them that this means something. So when I circle what team I think is going to win, it encourages children to go, oh, I wonder why she's doing that. It's all about mark making. It's starting to show that when I put a mark on a piece of paper, it means something, whether that's picking my footy tips for the year, whether it's going to the supermarket, and this is the other one that I always make Phoebe hold, is she holds my shopping list and she marks off my shopping. So what I'm showing her again is marks on a piece of paper mean something. Marks on a piece of paper have purpose. Because the challenge for some children, and especially in this day and age where most things are on our phones, is they don't see us writing as much as we would have seen our families writing. So we would have seen our families write postcards or journals, or they would have been writing, crosswords in the newspaper. A lot of our interaction now is on the screen. So we have to sort of go back to basics and deliberately go back to those old activities when our children are developing these skills. So writing a shopping list and ticking it off encourages mark making. Doing our footy tips encourages mark making. Also writing little notes to each other. So my twins are 8. So I write little notes to them in their lunchbox, and I write a little note for Phoebe in her lunchbox. And she's starting to realize, she gets a little piece of paper and she just mark makes, she scribbles on it, and she's starting to realize that note means something. It has a purpose, rather than here's an alphabet handwriting sheet that we have to form perfect letters. It has no excitement, no interest, no purpose to a child anyway. And that's where the frustration can come. So go right back to mark making. Another fun thing that we like to do is tracing shadows. So I put objects in the sunlight, on the ground. Objects could be dinosaurs or cars or whatever shapes you can find. And I get children to trace around the shadow or color in the shadow. It's just getting pencil, crayon, chalk, whatever material you want to use. It's just getting it in their hands and making them more exposed to it. It's not perfect letter formation, but you're building the interest around one of these things rather than the frustration with it. Because the worry that we see is if we skip all this stage of mark making and making a written communication interesting, then we're going to get to school and we're not going to make sense of it. Why am I sitting here writing letters if it doesn't make sense to me, if there's no purpose to it? The other thing I really wanted to let you know is when we look at progression of handwriting, now you might have already seen this, so apologies to those who have seen my YouTube channel, but I'm just going to go through with it for people who might not have seen it, is when I'm trying to write the letter of my name. Now, R is tricky. It's tricky for me, let alone children. That's a really complex skill. What I need them to be able to do first is scribble. But sometimes we feel concerned that scribbling isn't really handwriting, but it is, because children will start out scribbling. A 2 to 3 year old will start out scribbling like this. They'll start by scribbling up and down. That's the way that they'll scribble. The reason why they scribble up and down is because when between the ages of 2 and 3, they're still operating without crossing the midline. So the right-hand side of their brain just operates the left-hand side of their body, and the left-hand side of their brain just operates the right-hand side of their body, and it doesn't cross. We can't yet draw across the page and scribble across the page until we develop or start to develop those crossing the midline skills. So we'll slowly progress from scribbling up and down, and then by the ages of 3 and 4, we start to scribble left to right. If at this stage we can feel flustered and we feel that this has no purpose, then we can give up at this stage until we go to primary school. And it's very common. It's common to see children start to scribble, don't understand the purpose of it. So then they go to primary school and then they get a complicated letter and they get frustrated by that because they've missed the next important step. The next important step is drawing circles. And that's why I love children to draw circles around favourite things in a magazine, or circles around the footy calendar, circles around the days of the week, because when we draw circles, it's the start of letter formation. Because if you think about it, most letters have a circle in them of some sort. An R has a circle, C, D, A, they all have the starting of a circle. So being able to draw a circle is really, really important. The next shape we want to be able to draw is an X. X requires crossing the midline. And also spatial awareness, because as my texter leaves this point of my paper, I have to figure out where it goes so it crosses in the right spot of my X. That's why I love lists, crossing off lists. Also, when you pack, so if you're going to pack for school or pack for nanny and granddad's, you can write your list and cross off the things that are in your bag. We're starting to develop that beautiful crossing action. If you've been on my Facebook page, you probably have seen my crossing post just recently, and that's the reason why we're trying to do it. Before we even start to form the letters of our name, we're doing these random shapes on paper. The next stage you'll start to see is where they'll start to mimic what our writing looks like. And this is exciting when we start to see this. It'll look a little bit like waves, and it will go from left to right, and it will look like they're drawing on paper. This is an exciting stage of development that we don't want to miss. It was actually quite funny. I have beautiful friends, and their girl is 5, and she was writing like that. Her and Phoebe were playing on the weekend, and they were writing like that. They were actually making a menu for their cafe, and what it looked like was a bunch of scribble on the paper. And bless our family friend, he said, "Oh, that's just a scribble." And I quickly, abruptly interrupted him and said, no, that is not a scribble. That is exciting, because it's starting to progress from basic mark making to basic shapes to she's mimicking handwriting. And although there's not a real letter in there yet, this is where we love preppies to be. It's imitating that process of written communication. She's starting to understand that when I go to a cafe, the lady or the man at the cafe takes notes, and that's what I'm doing. It's all through modeling from other people. So anytime you get scribble on a piece of paper, please congratulate it, because the progression from having no interest in writing to starting to write. So lots of list making for the children to tick off, lots of things, lots of catalogues for the children to circle, and they'll slowly progress through those stages of their fine motor development.
If you will look after any little ones aged between 2 and 5, then my new early learning movement and play course is for you. If you have any questions, come and say hi at Play, Move, Improve. I hope to see you in our early learning movement and play course. Take care.